here's what it is. What's the difference between something that swings or grooves and something that doesn't? Like, they're right. Like, that's on the sort of out the end of the contraption, right? Like the other end of the black box, the output, is it feels good. Like, what's inside that black box? Like, what's happening so that the output feels good and swings to us? And it's a bunch of things. It's, as I said, orchestration and what you choose to play, but it's also consistency of the subdivisions. Like, that's an entire hour-long like discussion we could have. It's matching the right style. So like, right, so like the Dilla beat, so like what makes that groove? And that's like a sort of intentionally out of time one. But you also have all these kind of like organic styles, like Brazilian samba or like the Dilla beat, where it's not quantized, it's not strictly metronomic, but somehow it feels really good to dance to. And that's probably just decades of trial and error, but playing with those same root tools. So it's like, what do you have? You have relation of things in time. So it's like Dilla himself, like making those samples. And you have the sounds you make, the volume of those sounds, the frequency. And then you just have like what makes people feel good, what causes something to be danceable. And that's a fascinating thing, isn't it? Because I think that's probably something ineffable, like inside all of our evolved nervous systems, but also something we all kind of have in common, because like when you hit on the right beat, like it just works. Like swing worked, James Brown worked, rock and roll worked, hip hop worked, Dilla works, Texas Shuffle works, Steve Gadd worked. So there are a bunch of ways to slice it, but I also think maybe I can tie this into like the experimentation and like what I do when I practice, because there are certain things you internalize, like Clyde Stubblefield funky drummer beats or like Dilla beats, and then there are these sort of like free improvisation spaces where all of these things you've kind of crammed into your brain just come out in organic ways, exactly the same way that they would in conversation if you've learned a language. So one thing I've caught myself doing recently is like playing a beat that's like some part Clyde Stubblefield and some part Dilla. Right, so you can so like the first part is quantized, and then my body just kind of feels like which I guess is like a quarter triplet, a second quarter triplet thing, but maybe not quite. And yeah, I think like once you sort of internalize the fundamentals of time, which I would say are all those things we talked about earlier, like coordination, but also just like having an accurate sense in the moment. So you don't feel like something's grooving, but because you have like distortions in the way you're perceiving it, like you listen to the recording and you're like, but once you have those things together, there are a lot of directions you can go, and a lot of sort of trial and error you can do. And yeah, I'm happy to say, like, obviously there are still a ton of things I'm working on, and a ton of times like I'll hear myself on a recording and cringe. But I do feel lucky to kind of be at a place in my playing when maybe I'm not burning so much bandwidth, like just trying to stay at the tempo, so I have a little bit of spare bandwidth to like experiment with other ways of grooving. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Cool. I think we have time for one more. If anybody wants to get in there, yes, sir.
I'd like to ask about I guess just like your general thoughts about like playing with other musicians, like where are you lining up? You know, what kind of things are you listening for to line up with? I guess like that whole world of like swinging by yourself or like swinging like with other musicians and being able to hear what's going on.
That's a deep one. Yeah, those are two completely different skills, and they're both absolutely crucial. And yeah, actually, I made a video about this a few years ago. I think it's still maybe my most watched video ever, where it was something like the 5 secret skills of great musicians. And one of them is like lock up with a band. Because I think at the time, like I'd been, oh, woe is me, like getting a lot of mean comments on my videos, and then I would in a not entirely healthy way, like stalk people back to their Instagram or YouTube and check out their playing. And almost inevitably, they would be like playing a lot of fast, loud stuff and like not locking up with the band. And so that caused me to think about people like Jorge Rossi and Jeff Ballard, or even Brian Blade to a degree, like say when he's playing behind Nora Jones or something like that, where like an entire gig could just be like that's the entire thing he's doing. But then how do we say that guy is heavier than like somebody on YouTube who's doing all the chops, but like the touch sucks and like they're not really locking up with the band. And the answer is like those are the guys who are getting called for the gigs. It's like you might have chops, and you're not getting called for the American Idol band if you can't play together tightly with a band. And I think maybe that is something like you get in music school that like maybe the generation of kids who are only like coming up on the internet aren't getting. But okay, so we've established it's important. And then how do I approach it? So the little autobiography on this too was like, I think I was like vaguely aware of this in college, but I think really until maybe like 2005 or 2006, in retrospect, when I examined it, I always kind of had an assumption that if I was doing the playing together with myself part, that if everyone else in the room was kind of just doing that simultaneously, then we'd make a recording and it would just coalesce. And at some point I had a rude awakening that no, I needed to studiously focus on locking up with the band. I think maybe part of the thing that got me into this was like being at music school and having like really heavy guest artists stop by, and then just like walking into a rehearsal room and like Miguel Zenon and Antonio Sanchez are playing, and just seeing up close how like they're not playing any different notes necessarily than I would play, like unless they're chopping. But if they're just grooving or something, like they're not really doing anything different, but it's just like everybody is putting their beat in the same place. And that's that sort of synergistic thing that like, you know, in classical percussion makes it feel amazing to play bass drum in Mahler, or like timpani on O Fortuna or something like that. It makes it feel amazing to be in a samba school. Just like drumline, right, is the ultimate of this, where it's like the collective abilities of all these humans like closely synchronized around a single thing. So then I kind of became obsessed with that. And I think by like 2010, 2011, maybe my chops weren't that great, but I felt like my ability actually to lock up with a band. You know, another part of this was like drum covers were becoming a thing. And so like, and this is before Moises or anything where you could like easily remove the other drummer. Like, so if I'm playing Albemarle by Will Vinson and I have to lock up with Ari Honig, otherwise it's going to sound like shit. Like that teaches you to pay really, really studious attention to like where you're putting your beats. And then I think like it's sort of two sides, right? Just sort of like the social media thing is like, first you have to have the insight that it's of paramount importance. And then once you have that and you feel it deeply, you're probably going to get there one way or another. It's sort of like once you realize the train's coming, you're going to get off the tracks. I think we leave it there. Guys, this has been amazing. Huge thanks again to Connor for putting it together. I know some of you guys had class and had to bail, but thanks so much for everybody sticking around and hearing me drone on. It's been a privilege. And yeah. Thank you guys.